The word mainstream has become quite a dirty one within pretty much all hobbies. The increasing push to sell to a large scale of people and to garner a wider audience has received a pushback and criticism which has ratcheted up in intensity over the years since your more nerd-associated media scraped into the public eye. Now, the argumentation related to this can be exhausting, as there is definitely a fair amount of toxic, stay out of my clubhouse gatekeeping associated with it. But there is also credibility to some of these arguments. Notably, the push to appeal to wider audiences has led to the dilution of some genres and their more niche mechanics. And more notably, with all art forms becoming more preyed upon by executives and shareholders, leading to the requirement for massive sales from every product, there has been not only a mutating of genres, sometimes to success to be fair, but also the sidelining of those believed not to be marketable enough. We saw this in gaming with the West's assault on JRPGs at the start of the 7th gen, or that 2009 to 2013 period where the horror genre basically became the zombie gun simulators. I mean, there was a period where AAA companies were trying to tell gamers that they don't even like single-player games because multiplayer was more profitable. This has been negated a little bit, with digital platforms now allowing access to generally larger audiences interested in specific genres, as well as crowdfunding, which allows for those who specifically want something to fund it directly. And to be fair to the industry for once, there has been a begrudging, reluctant willingness to try some more diverse styles. For example, horror is now seen as a viable genre again. And with things like Tactics Ogre Reborn, Triangle Strategy, Unicorn Overlord, and further back XCOM, the turn-based tactics genre has gotten a bit more attention again. But despite this bump in interest with turn-based tactics, I do still feel that the strategy genre at large is pretty underserved. Unfortunately, I think it's been a bit of a victim of the desire to have games playable on PC and consoles. I used to enjoy real-time strategy particularly when I was younger, but I don't really find myself having the time for it now. So rather selfishly, I'm not concerned about that. What I rather want to talk about is the subgenre real-time tactics. It took the planning and strategy associated with the real-time strategy genre, but mostly removed the resource management and on-site troop deployment, rather focusing on giving the players set resources for the mission and then just needing to get the job done. And so introducing a kind of more puzzle aspect to the gameplay. And as I say, you don't see much of it nowadays. There was recently a new Desperados, and in 2016 there was Shadow Tactics, but I don't know too much else of note. However, we have now been promised a return of one of, if not the, main pillar of the genre, and that's what I want to talk about today. First, a little bit of a background. On November 8th, 1923, the National Socialists instigated the Beer Hall Push, an attempted coup of the then Weimar Republic. This action would thrust the party into national attention and so form the basis for their rise. On February 27th, 1933, the Reichstag... No, don't worry, we're not doing that. In 1996, Pyro Studios was founded, one of the key members involved being Gonzalo Suarez, who had come from the then defunct Operasoft, one of the big companies of Spain's ZX Spectrum golden era. And they hit the ground running with the release of Commandos Behind Enemy Lines in 1998. The game is based on controlling a handful of elite soldiers during the Second World War, dropped into stealth missions with the job of disrupting enemy operations, usually blowing things up. The game was a success off the bat, to the surprise of its creators. Suarez admitted this in an interview with PC Zone in 2001, that the game was not designed with mass appeal in mind, being intentionally difficult. But despite this, it sold 706,000 copies by the end of 1998 and reached 1.5 million by the year 2000. This success would lead to an expansion pack a year later and 2 sequels in 2001 and 2003 respectively. And then in 2006, something happened. So, let's take a more in-depth look at this series and what I liked about the genre it popularized at the time, and what went wrong. Starting with this breakout in 1998. Let's start with a breakdown of the core gameplay that will be a mainstay of the series. Yes, all the games in the series will play this way. I said all the games in the series will play this way. The game is viewed from a top-down perspective, giving a bird's eye view of the battlefield. You are given a select group of commandos per mission, who you select with the mouse, and then move around by clicking on the relevant location on the map. You are given an objective, and you need to get your manis to that said position. To get past the enemies in your way, you need to monitor their patrol routes, and synchronize your movements based on them. By holding down Shift and clicking on an enemy, you can see their vision cone, with it being segmented into a light and a dark green. In the dark green, they can only see you if you are standing, meaning you can still go prone and get past them. Whereas with the bright, they will see you no matter what. Obviously, we will be delving more into why this loop is actually interesting shortly, but first, let's talk about one of the first things you'll notice: the presentation. Most notably, something you really don't see much of anymore, and not even that much back then either, to be honest. On starting, you are greeted with actual historical footage and given some background with each mission. And I like it. When I was younger, I was quite a big World War II nerd. Fortunately, this is before Hearts of Iron 4 existed to send me down a dark path. And while I'm not so much anymore, I still have enough of it in me to appreciate the acknowledgement of the context. Amplified by the game being inspired by the actual commando unit of World War II, even mentioning Dudley Clark, who was integral to its founding. Upon getting into actual gameplay, the next thing that will hit you is pre-rendered backgrounds, and I think they look great. Not being based on the graphics of the time has allowed it to age very well and not be an eyesore to gameplay. And I also just think it fits well with the historical setting. I also like that the settings and locations used for the missions don't just rely on those popular and mainstream ones of the war. You have missions set in Norway and Africa. Okay, look, I know that Africa does actually get used quite a lot, but let's be honest, it's usually just like Operation Torch and Al Alamein, so not really. And the last thing I just want to mention is it's quite funny that there is a setting for turning off verbose Commandos, because honestly, there was one or two situations where I was quite tempted to do so.
Yes, sir. Coming right over. Sir. Coming, sir. Yes, sir. Coming right over. Sir. Coming, sir.
Though it won't save you from the enemies.
Alarm! No problem, alarm, man! Alarm! 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 Halt! Halt!
But did a wise man not once say that you cannot just rely on presentation? So let's get into the meat and potatoes. My earlier description of the gameplay might have made it sound extremely simplistic, but this game is pretty damn difficult, and will require you to have a good knowledge of each commando's abilities. For importantly, each one is distinct and has their own specific uses. They only have two things in common: the ability to crouch, probably not worth mentioning to be honest, and they all have a pistol to defend themselves very ineptly.
That's easy. That hurts. Just leave it to me.
Otherwise, they are very much unique. Number 1, we have the Green Beret, our big beefy boy, who is one of only 2 characters who can move bodies, which I'm sure you can imagine is most helpful. Tied to that, he's the only one who can move barrels that can be used to cover bodies or exploded. In terms of his equipment, he has a knife for stabbies, the decoy, which is a small remote-controlled radio that can be used to get the attention of guards, and the axe, which he can use to climb walls and mountains, though not always to the best of results.
Halt! That's easy. That hurts.
It can also be used to dig into snow and dirt, which helps for travelling long distances when you won't be able to cross before a patrol returns. Or maybe for setting up an ambush. Number 2, the sniper. Probably the most self-explanatory one. He only has 2 items: a health kit for healing the squad, and a sniper rifle, which I think it's pretty obvious what that's for. But it does have limited ammo, so you can't just go wild with it. Moving on to number 3 is our watery boy, the Marine. He is the only one who can pilot boats, actually carrying around an inflatable raft that can be deployed and packed up as needed, so long as its existence doesn't send the guards into a wild fury.
Yes.
Bro, it's a plastic boat. He also has diving equipment, which allows him to go underwater where he can't be seen, so making him great for scouting the map. Like the Green Beret, he also has a knife, but added to that he has the harpoon, which allows for ranged silent kills. Though it does have a very long load time, and the range kind of sucks. Number 4, Captain Boom, the Sapper. He handles all the explosives, be they timed or remote bombs, as well as having the ability to throw grenades. When it comes to silent kills, he can place a man trap that will kill any enemy if they walk into it. However, it must then be reset. And lastly, he has the wire cutters, for, well, cutting wires. Next up, another one who I think is pretty self-explanatory, the driver. The only one who can drive land vehicles such as trucks, bikes and armored vehicles.
Sure thing. Where is that?
Otherwise, he also has the medikit and the machine gun, which is much better for defensive purposes, especially for taking out patrols, which usually have at least 3 people together. Just remember when using the vehicles though, that your spy might be there in disguise as well.
No problem, man. Finally, some action. Consider it done, boss.
Speaking of, lastly, the spy, the other body carrier. He can steal enemy clothes off of clotheslines and then move around unnoticed, being able to distract enemies as well. He also has the lethal syringe for killing enemies. Now, these descriptions probably make some commandos sound better than the others, and that is true in some situations. But the key word is some. While there are missions where you will mostly just use one more than the others, on average it does balance out. Especially since you don't always get all of them in a mission. But even more especially because there isn't a set way of completing each mission. You are given an objective, told a few things to take note of, and then just left to get the job done. So it's basically up to you for how you want to do the mission. Whether you want to avoid killing as much as possible, stealthily assassinate everyone, gun down enemies as much as possible, or drive trucks into people. But regardless of how you're going to do it, precision is key. This is a game where you need to learn the hotkeys for each action, as you will need to carry out consecutive actions within seconds of each other, as well as closely coordinating Commandos' actions with each other and synchronizing them with enemy vision cones and movements.
Say, officer. I see. Consider it done. Come on over. I'm coming. Fine. I agree. Whatever you say, officer.
And it feels really rewarding to have a plan on how to get past a certain area and then to execute it correctly. Especially since you can make use of means that you might normally think are bad ideas in stealth games. For example, you can leave footprints in the snow to lure an enemy into an ambush, or just away from their position. Or, if an enemy spots you, they don't open fire straight away. Instead, they tell you to halt. So you can actually use this as a way to distract an enemy and then have another commando sneak up on them. Or you can just quickly pop your head out and then run off to draw them away. Or leave a body out to draw a guard away. Or just let off a gunshot. Or even blow up a whole building as a diversion. Another indication of good mission design is the sense of escalation. Even if your initial plan succeeds, you still need to be able to adapt and think on your feet. The situation can change pretty quickly, especially after an alarm has been set off. And this leads to enemies breaking off from their patrols, moving in unexpected ways, leaving their positions, and even more patrols appearing. So you have to keep yourself alert. But you aren't just thrown into this needing to consider all the different permutations from the start. Despite its notorious reputation for being difficult, the game actually has a pretty decent difficulty curve. The first missions have limited enemies with pretty straightforward, easily readable patrol routes, before steadily progressing to the routes being more complex, having multiple guards watching our location, as well as needing to procure equipment on site and plotting out your way to evacuate. Just be very careful when the escape vehicle arrives.
That's easy. Affirmative, sir.
However, despite all my enthusiasm, there are definitely some flaws which are noticeable enough to become annoying after extended play. Firstly, you can't rotate the map, which obviously just makes seeing different perspectives not possible. But it specifically leads to this annoyance where you will place an object, but then realize you actually want to move that object, but now you can't see it anymore, so you can't really pick it up. Secondly, as nice as the environments are, sometimes the characters kind of do blend into it a bit, which means you might not see enemies, or you might forget where you left a commando and then not see him and accidentally lure an enemy into it. And of course, the big one, which is often thrown out at games like this, it can be pretty trial and error-y, and encourage, I said scum saving in the script, save scumming. It can take a lot of tries to time an action just right. And even if you take the time to check all the guards watching a specific area, there's still a chance you will miss one guard who happened to look your way for the one split second of their 5-minute patrol route and then descend the entire base on you. Look, there is a reason that the modern games of this genre have a counter that tells you the time since you last saved.
Oh, something is wrong.
Okay, just a few more minor nitpicks. I don't find the missions to be diverse enough. Not in terms of like environments and locales, that's great. But just in terms of what your objectives are. It's basically always just blow something up. There's one mission late in the game where you have to stop the enemy from blowing up a bridge. And I just thought like that's really hypocritical given what we've been doing so far. And then 2 missions later, you come back to blow up the bridge. So it's not the problem of the bridge being destroyed, it's just only we're allowed to be the ones doing it. And lastly, there's like no music. There's this really faint occasional little drum beat noise, but nothing that really adds an atmosphere. Can someone who has the like original game confirm this? Because even the main menu doesn't have it. So I'm thinking it might be a Steam thing, given their brilliant track record of running old games. The rest of the games I play will be played off of the original physical CD copies I own, so hopefully no problems going forward. Overall, a very good opening installment. It's one of those cases of the series beginner being mostly fleshed out already. While it has its flaws, successive iterations really only need to do tweaks instead of any massive overhauls. As evidenced by the fact that instead of the next installment being a sequel, it would be an expansion pack the following year, which is our next stop. Releasing 9 months after the original and going on to sell 350,000 copies by the year 2000, Beyond the Call of Duty adds 8 new missions onto the 20 from the previous. Basically just giving you more of what you would have enjoyed in the previous game. Well, I'm assuming you enjoyed it. Why would you be buying this if you didn't? That being said, a massive disclaimer here. There is the assumption that you have played the previous game. While there is actually the introduction of difficulty levels in this one, there is no curve as was prior. From the first mission, they assume that you are well acquainted with the gameplay. I was introduced to the series by the more stripped down and straightforward, more on that later, Commandos 3. And the next one I played was this one, since I assumed it was the first game. Yes, I know it mentions behind enemy lines on the back, but I was a child and therefore extremely stupid. Anyway, I struggled a lot with this game first time, so I just assumed the early games were bad. However, I am more enlightened now, so let's talk about all the good stuff, starting with how much nicer it looks. This expansion allows for higher resolutions than before, and I don't know if that's the only reason why, but there is a noticeable improvement in graphical fidelity. The animation also feels smoother as well. And there's also music, which, while a bit repetitive, since it's mostly the same track each mission, is good. Added to the improved fidelity is even more interesting and well-crafted locations. But it's not just about how nice the missions look, it's the objectives assigned to them as well. Assuaging my complaints, there is more variety. While the first mission is just explodiating things again, the next one you need to rescue someone from a firing squad. And then in the third mission, you need to fetch a guidance system from a plane, adding the challenge of needing to plan around the fact that the Green Beret will be out of action during the task of carrying it to the truck. Then, yes, the next mission is blowing something up again, but it has an added challenge that you need to combine your bombs with explosive barrels to be able to destroy the target. And then the next mission requires you to kidnap an enemy officer. So, all good and well for more missions, but this isn't just a mission pack. Beyond the Call of Duty adds a fair chunk of features, many of which would become staples of the subsequent releases. First though, I want to talk about something which wasn't put in again, and I can't really understand why. You can now take enemies hostage, which creates a small sphere of influence in which you can move them around and use them to distract other guards. And I just like it as something you can use if you don't have the spy. It can also be helpful for situations where you want to take an enemy out, but won't have enough time to move the body. You can take them down, quickly puppeteer them, and then lead them away to finish the job. Really not sure why it wasn't put in again. It's not like it's the most overpowered feature. You need to keep the enemy in a pretty small range, or else they raise the alarm. So it's not like it breaks the game. Anyway, it does tie in with the new feature, the introduction of non-lethal means of takedowns. You can now incapacitate enemies and then handcuff them with 3 characters. The Green Beret baps people with his fists, the driver talks people with his knob kitty, and the spy uses chloroform. It does bring up the question of what S&M matters these people get up to that they have so many spare handcuffs, but it is definitely a welcome addition. It allows you to play a pacifist run if you don't want to be a mass murderer, and obviously it is needed for the hostage taking since you aren't necromancers who can commandeer dead people. But the third reason is that the spy can now take uniforms off of handcuffed enemies as well, instead of just clotheslines. Which may raise the question of why even have the clotheslines now. But there is still a reason. Along with the body pilfering, there is also the introduction of uniform levels. So, looting a standard soldier will give you a standard soldier's uniform, which can be seen through by higher ranks, and so only can be used for distracting the common rabble. While the clothesline will always give you the highest level officer uniform, so it's still important. Having mentioned the driver, he now also has a rifle along with his machine gun. And they don't take it off of him like they did in the previous one. Because honestly, as much as I spoke about the usefulness of all the commandos in the previous game, often they did make him a lot less usable because they kept taking his bloody machine gun away. Anyway, moving away from specific character items, all characters can now throw rocks to distract enemies, And we have the introduction of cigarettes, which can be used to pull enemies away and begin the long Commandos tradition of players throwing them closer and closer, desperately trying to get the enemy to see it until realizing that you could throw it right into their face and they wouldn't even take them. But what you can do is if you throw it right in front of them while they're looking that way, it can startle them. And lastly, back to specifics, we have a whole new character. Well, kind of. The intel officer works similarly to the spy in that she can move amongst enemies unseen and also distract them. But with the unique addition that while the spy needs to upgrade his uniform if you wish to get past higher level officers, she has one uniform that works for all enemies, except Gestapo officers who can see through all outfits. So, we don't only have a mission pack, but an expansion pack tweaking the gameplay from the first for an even better experience. However, there are unfortunately some negatives. 3 that particularly curdle my nerdle. Firstly, not such a big negative, but the pathfinding can be a bit wonked sometimes. Not such an issue, but still a bit annoying. Much more annoyingly, they have changed some of the hotkeys from the first game. For a game which requires quick execution, I really don't need to be forgetting or pressing the wrong key. And it's not even a case of changing them all to something else, it's swapping them. Most irritatingly is the Green Beret. In behind enemy lines, the hotkey for his decoy is Q and his gun is G. Now and beyond the Call of Duty, it's the other way round. So I have situations where he needs to defend himself from enemy fire and his response is to chuck a bloody box at them. And why would you not want the hotkey for gun to be G? I could rant about this for a while, but let's just move on to the last annoyance. And it relates to our new character. You barely get to play with her. She is only in the last mission of the entire game, and even then, you don't have access to her from the off, and get her like halfway through. I get you don't want to oversaturate, but it's a bit of a problem when I think you get more playtime with her in the tutorial. But, while these do annoy me, they aren't such massive detractors. Beyond the Call of Duty takes the first game and gives you an even better version of its gameplay, in fun, and more varied missions, leaving Pyro Studios needing to really do something great with a sequel. And they completely knocked it out of the park. Let's not beat around the bush here. This is the best game in the series. And we know it is because it sold well below expectations, the fate of all the best games. It released in September 2001, and that 2-year gap was used to improve on the game in pretty much every way. We'll start with the tweaks to our commandos at large, as they now have a list of shared commands. Apart from one, they can now all knock out enemies with their fists, and likewise, apart from one, actually two, they can all tie up knocked out enemies. They can also all carry bodies to be moved away, and are all able to drive basic vehicles like cars and trucks. And can all carry out one of the new features. Commandos 2 introduces the inventory. You can now examine boxes, enemy bodies, and the inventories of other commandos. This allows you to swap out items, and also take weapons off of enemies that you neutralize. You can then use these machine guns and rifles that you pilfer, being able to take more ammo if necessary as well. Everyone can also use health kits now, as well as the new means of healing, canned food, though that can only be used by the person holding it. And everyone can now use wire cutters. As well as a new feature which ties with another new feature. Along with the cigarettes introduced in Beyond the Call of Duty, you can now find wine bottles that can be used for distracting enemies. But not just for distraction, you can also use them to incapacitate enemies. You can infuse them with sleeping pills that will knock enemies out when they drink them. You can also drug dog food to knock out guard dogs similarly. And speaking of cigarettes and bottles, there is now something to alleviate that previously mentioned grievance of them not taking the cigarettes. You get binoculars, which you can use on enemies that will tell you how much health they have, their rank, and whether or not they leave their position. So you can actually know, is it worth it to use these distraction items? And a lot of these things are just things that make sense when you think about it. I mean, they are supposed to be highly trained special forces. They should all be able to drive basic vehicles and use standard weapons.
Unit of elite men, experts in hand-to-hand combat, in handling all types of weapons and explosives.
But I can see how this homogenization of mechanics may lead some to believe that the uniqueness and usefulness of some commandos is being diminished. Well, there is still the differences in speed and toughness of the commandos, which is actually more pronounced in this one than the previous two. But they also have more tools and abilities specific to them. Our first two don't get any new items, but the Green Beret now has the ability to climb poles and move along the cables, jump through windows, and carry cargo boxes. The Sniper can climb up telephone poles and use them as a vantage point. Number 3, the Marine, or Diver as he has now been called. His harpoon has now been restricted to use in water, but he still has ranged ability as he now throws his knives rather than using them in close quarters. He also has a grappling hook which can be used to climb up walls and then be left down for others to use as well, or it can be used to set a tripwire. The Sapper is still exclusively the explosives expert, but that now includes new equipment, including the blowtorch, flamethrowers, and bazookas. He also ties together with the Driver, who is still the only one who can drive armored vehicles like tanks, but for full tank effectiveness, you need the Sapper now as well to be able to actually fire the tank. So it may make it seem like the Driver has been made even more useless, but he does have some extra stuff. He can make pitfall traps that enemies can fall into, and he can also place his own tripwires. And he has the ability to throw Molotovs, smoke grenades, and sleeping gas grenades. The spy is much the same as before, but now, depending on his uniform rank relative to the enemies, he can order them to look in a particular direction or even move a short distance away. So, that's improvements to past characters, but we aren't done there, as we also have new characters. Starting with Natasha, who I guess you can argue isn't really new, but she may as well be. As mentioned previously, she has the ability to walk around unnoticed, but she can only distract low-level soldiers. However, she makes up for that by being able to use the sniper rifle as well. And while she doesn't have the ability to knock out soldiers using her bare hands, she can use bottles close range to pop them on the bonds. Next, a brand new character, the Thief. He has the same cable traversal abilities as the Green Beret, along with the ability to jump out of windows, but he takes it up a notch as he can climb up walls from the outside and enter buildings. Additionally, in keeping with his name, he can pick pockets and pick locks, along with being easily the fastest of all the commandos. He does have one drawback though. While he can knock people out, he lacks the ability to tie them up. though I suppose there are means of keeping them incapacitated until someone else comes. Lastly, we come to Whiskey, the dog. Not too much to him. He can bark to distract enemies, but his main thing is he's a courier. Either you can just have him hold things for extra inventory space, or you can specifically use him to transfer things between two displaced commandos. Everyone has a whistle that, when used, will draw Whiskey to them and place him under their influence. And if you just don't really feel like worrying about him, you can just pick him up and put him into his doggy backpack. So a lot of extra stuff when it comes to the characters. But we're not done. Let's get on to general gameplay improvements. Firstly, something I've kind of already alluded to, we now have interiors to buildings. But not only that, there is interaction between the exterior and interior. You can peek out of doors or windows to see outside, and from that window you can also fire weapons. But more fun is the stuff you can do from outside. You obviously use doors as points of entry, but there's a chance you might get shot at. So maybe take a peek inside first, or use your binoculars to grab a look. Or just remove the risk entirely and throw some grenades in first. Or if you want to be a bit more stealthy, you can use the sniper rifle to look in and pick off enemies first. Continuing with this theme, underwater is also its own sub-map now. All the commandos can now swim and duck under cover to avoid being seen, with the ability to take a peek above to keep track of your bearings. So, you might say this is taking some uniqueness away from the diver, but he is still the best for underwater matters, as he firstly has the scuba tank, so doesn't have to come up for air, and he can also defend himself underwater. Commandos 2 has now fully introduced wild animals as features on the map, so you will need his harpoon to fend off sharks, and also enemy divers. On to more map related matters, you can now rotate it, with 4 stationary perspectives outside, and full 360 rotation indoors. And notably, the maps are also bigger, particularly if you include all the indoor shenanigans. And they have also made sure that they aren't just big for the sake of being big. You are given more objectives to do, and can easily keep track of them with an improved objective list, and can be given more in the middle of a mission. But it's not just objectives. You can find books which gives you cuttings of photographs, and if you find all of them in a mission, you get a bonus mission. Though not all of them are that thrilling.
At your service.
But getting back onto those objectives, the missions are keeping up with the variety introduced in Beyond the Call of Duty. But not just in the type of objectives, they have some interesting unique situations specifically for certain missions. For example, you now have night missions which segment the enemy's vision cones into 3 parts, where with the darkest part you can't even be seen at all, even if standing. Or the third mission in Arctic conditions, where if you are outside, your commandos start to freeze, so you have to wear enemy clothes until you find thermal wear. And you now also have missions that are inspired by famous war films, such as Saving Private Ryan, The Guns of Navarone, and Bridge on the River Kwai. I actually watched those last 2 for this video, and you definitely get the same vibe as the films. Speaking of Bridge on the River Kwai, you now have missions that take place in Myanmar, or Burma in the game, so we get some variation in enemies. Though, it does create the situation now where Natasha is going around trying to seduce Japanese men. It's bloody DEI again, taking jobs away from men. It's supposed to be Western men who go to the East for Asian women, not the other way around. Lastly, when it comes to new additions, there is now the ability to manually control vehicles by using the arrow keys. And this is a godsend, given how annoying it was to attempt to navigate previously. Though, I'm probably not much better. Now, as with how improved controls made Castlevania 4 easier than its predecessors, there is a risk that these quality of life improvements make the game too easy. And yes, this one is easier than the previous ones, with the developers deliberately wanting it to be that way. There are still difficulty levels, with the harder ones being pretty damn challenging. And there is also some balancing to attempt to compensate. Noticeably, you can no longer just charge at enemies to take them out. There is a cone of sound around your commandos, in which enemies will be able to hear footsteps and attacks such as knifings and fistings. No, not like that. So you do need to be a bit more thoughtful about how you approach taking out groups of enemies who are close together. There's also the alert state now. After hearing a noise, finding a body, or seeing a commando, enemies enter into an alerted state, which is indicated by their vision cone turning red. In this state, they are bloodthirsty. There is a new feature where the enemies don't notice you straight away. If you stay within the dark part of the cone, there will be a little bit of a timer which will allow you to quickly get out of dodge, but if they are in alert mode, they just open fire instantly. The enemies also do have better AI generally now, making their responses a bit harder to predict than before. Well, usually.
Wir haben einen Verlust! All mine. Sie haben einen Kameraden erwischt! Wir haben einen Verlust! Sie haben uns angegriffen!
But yes, it is probably easier than the first game, but more importantly, it is more fun. The new abilities and commandos, with all their new items and level layouts, give different ways to finish the missions, which adds some great replay value in which you can try and finish missions in different ways. And it also allows for more screwing around if you don't actually feel like doing the mission. There are some small negatives though. I do feel that you get too many items. And by that, I don't mean too many variations in items. I mean, when searching containers, there are too many of the same item often. And it's not even about like making the game too easy, it's just that you can't carry all of it. Another annoying thing is that when Natasha or the spy run in their disguise, they are spotted immediately. What is so suspicious about running? There's a bloody war on. Sometimes there might be matters that need urgent attention. I get that they probably thought that their ability to move around without detection is already quite unfair, but I'm not even trying to take out enemies. I would just like to get from one side of the docks to another this year, please. And lastly, while the new graphics is good, this doesn't really apply to the faces. They are quite unpleasant.
Aha.
But those are very small issues in a great game. Commandos 2 is isometric real-time tactics gameplay excellence. it would take something really special to improve upon this.
Oh, bugger.
And honestly, it doesn't feel like they even tried. So, Commandos 2 did not match up to sales expectations generated after the first game. Oh, what a shock! Publishers claiming a game didn't meet sales expectations. By January 2002, it was confirmed that 500,000 copies had been sold, but Eidos claimed to register a net loss of £11 million. Now, this wasn't just the fault of Commandos. Others to blame included Deus Ex Invisible War, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire 2, Olympic Winter Games Salt Lake City 2002, and Hurdy-Gurdy. But despite who is to blame, if you look at the name recognition of those titles, Commandos 3 would be under a fair bit of pressure to be the one to turn things around. And what a disappointing sequel. I do have a bit of a weird relationship with this one. This was the first Commandos I played, and so naturally I have a soft spot because it introduced me to the series. But going back after having played through its predecessors, it really doesn't stand up. There's just so much missing compared to the second game. Firstly, we have less characters. The driver is gone, the Tasha is gone, and Whiskey has been sent back to the kennels. Apart from one mission where you do it for like 3 seconds to complete an objective, you can't drive vehicles anymore. Bottles are gone, mine detectors are gone, canned food is gone, the ability to search cabinets is gone, with all items just kept in the standard wooden crates. And on that note, the thief does still have the ability to pick locks, but you do it like in the second tutorial mission and it's never seen again. But it wouldn't even matter if they were, because the mission design wouldn't lead you to want to engage with these mechanics. Missions are now extremely linear and very action-y. And I think what gets me most is you aren't even really encouraged to engage in stealth in this installment. A lot of the missions are eliminate all the enemies. So it's kind of laying bare the change in mindset already, but it's also more subconscious how it guides you to just shoot everything. As I said, the missions are more linear, which limits exploration. But given that what you are mostly going to find is just boxes with weapons, which you can just get from the enemies, there is like no side content or bonus content, so there's really no encouragement to look around. All there is finish the mission. So why not take the path of least resistance? And this is pushed even more by the few additions or changes that also just facilitate combat. Firstly, a lot of the missions have a type of time limit, either an actual timer or a caveat like you can't lose too many allies or they're attacking a specific target you have to defend. A bit more on that later. But it's not just that. There are changes to gameplay that facilitate this. 2 of the new additions are that the thief now gets piano wire, in one mission only, so he also has a silent way to murder enemies, and a new item is the assault rifle, which has similar range to the normal rifle, but it's able to fire without pause. However, it has the drawback of needing 2 shots to kill instead of just 1. Continuing on the combat thread, the Green Beret can pick up machine guns from turrets, enemies now have health bars, and everyone can use grenades, with Molotovs and gas grenades now being given to the sapper as his unique items. I will say on the gas grenade note, I do like that you have to be wearing the gas mask now, not to be affected by it as well. I also like that if the character has a health kit in their inventory, they will automatically use it if their health drops too low. But that does also show the mentality is more geared towards engaging in firefights. Another factor is the refinement of a feature that was actually introduced in the second game that I didn't mention. You can place your commandos into an overwatch state, where they will automatically open fire on enemies who enter their vision cone, which obviously allows for things like ambushes. However, in Commandos 2, if you wanted the character to move, they would automatically put the weapon away and leave such a state. But in Commandos 3, they still stay in that mode while you move. So you can literally just keep moving forward and then automatically lock onto enemies that enter your vision cone. Also, the thief now has the ability to tie up enemies, which leads into another criticism. If you thought the refinements of Commandos 2 might have made the characters too interchangeable, that is like 10 times the case now. Apart from the sniper and his sniper rifle, the sapper and his explosives, and of course the spy's disguises, there is like no real difference between the characters. You may as well just use the thief, since he is still the fastest. All of this is also not helped by the new interface being counterintuitively frustrating to use. I say counterintuitively because it does seem like they attempted to streamline it, but especially if you played the previous games, it's really annoying. Instead of having each item being separate and having its own hotkey, they are broken up into different spaces on an action bar at the bottom of the screen. Firstly, you have equipped weapon, then change stance, then the Overwatch mode, followed by the vision cone, and finally cycling through distraction items and abilities. And there is very few hotkeys now. For most of the distraction stuff, you have to right click on the icon, select which one you want, and then move to click on the enemy you want to use it on. And for the weapon, you can use a hotkey to cycle between them, but there is no longer a dedicated hotkey for each weapon. And to specifically annoy me further, for the few hotkeys there are, they have changed them again. Notably, W is no longer examine anymore, and instead cycle through weapon, which led to this wonderful incident.
Easy.
So yes, Commandos 3 is definitely disappointing. But not just because of the falloff from the previous game, but because despite my numerous complaints, there is still good stuff here, and good ideas that I wish were expanded on. Firstly, a quick one. The game is technically impressive. The graphics are good, and it transitions between missions without much need for loading. Even when the mission takes place in a new area, there is very little loading. And despite the maps being a lot smaller, I do like a lot of the mission settings. Commandos 3 has one of the best missions in the series. Get to the engine. The mission tasks you with eliminating all of the enemies on a moving train. And this is probably the most Commandos mission in the game, in that you actually have to use all your characters and their abilities and plan out your actions a lot more specifically than I did for the rest of the missions. I love this stage. It was given on a demo disc with the NAG magazine, which was like South Africa's big gaming magazine. We would only get games as Christmas or birthday presents, so I played this demo so many times until I got the full game. And it's just such a great stage. The basis for all future train stages in games. That's right, Uncharted 2 would not have happened if it wasn't for Commandos. But more so than the level design, I do like some of the mission ideas. The first mission in Stalingrad sees you play as the sniper, and you need to take out another sniper before he takes out all of your allies. And I really like that one. It reminds me of the Metal Gear Solid Sniper Wolf fight. There is a mission in France where you have to ambush a convoy passing through a town, and a mission in Berlin, where you have to assassinate a traitor. And this mission also has a cheeky little cameo. That's right, it's our boy. It's Elon. But while I do like these missions, they are all let down by something that I don't feel like would have happened in the previous game. The sniper mission is let down by that time limit. As I said, you have to take out the enemy sniper before he kills everyone. But there are also other enemies in the mission who you first need to worry about if you want to get close enough to the enemy sniper, which obviously takes up a fair bit of time, which will use the time for you to actually plan on you approaching your actual objective, which kind of just leads you to brute forcing it and save scumming until you find the quickest way to get to the objective. In the convoy mission, time is also an issue. They give you mines and even ally soldiers to place for your ambush, but you aren't given any time to actually prepare the ambush. The enemies start attacking within like 30 seconds, so I basically just ignored the allies and all the mines and just hid around the barn throwing grenades and molotovs. Commandos 2 had similar missions where you had to ambush, but the difference was you were given time to prepare for them. You had to click a button to start the enemy attack, which maybe wasn't like horribly realistic, but it made the game actually have more strategy. At least give me like 3 minutes to prepare. But I think the Berlin mission highlights the drop-off the best. It sounds like a really cool idea. You are told you have to kill the traitor, and you're given 3 ways you can do it. You can get a sniper rifle and make his head go pop, you can get explosives and make his car go boom boom, or you can get an officer uniform and juice him up. And it sounds great, doesn't it? Giving you a non-linear approach to completing the objective. But the problem is, they have to tell you how you can do it. In Commandos 2, they wouldn't even tell you different ways to do it. After playing a few missions, you would just find your own way of completing the objective and be aware of the means available. You could snipe them, you could blow up their car, you could syringe them, you could stab them, you could machine gun them, you could set them on fire, you could hit them with a car, you could drop them in a pit, you could throw a knife at them, you could knock them unconscious, tie them up, steal their clothes, put the clothes on, carry them to the center of the camp, place explosive barrels around them, place a time bomb on top of them, and while the time ticks down, you can run around in circles and then be taken with them in the explosion. I think I might have played these games a bit too much now. So yes, I do like the mission ideas, but there just doesn't seem to have been given enough time to iron out these details.
All mine.
But I'm actually going to put a positive twist on this. As I said, Commandos 3 did introduce me to the series. I played it and clearly enjoyed it enough that I wanted to seek out the earlier games in the series. And that's because, in spite of the simplification and actionification, the core Commandos loop is still there. And so, I think that Destination Berlin can actually be a good entry point into the series. You can definitely get enjoyment out of it and become a fan of the series. So my advice is play it first, or at the very least play Commandos 2 last so you won't feel disappointed by the drop-off that the third game had. The Commandos series is 3 games of varying good quality. You have Behind Enemy Lines and its expansion, which introduced a unique style of gameplay, making a concerted effort to focus on the best aspects of that style of gameplay and achieving success. Followed by Men of Courage, which took that gameplay, sharpened it, refined the flaws, and added so much more to it. Followed by Destination Berlin, which is still a pretty good game in isolation, but will leave fans of the previous disappointed in the decline from the previous. Maybe not to the same extent, but a similar thing happened with the 3 original Thief games, which coincidentally was also published by Eidos. Anyway, 2 very good games, and a good entry point to those very good games to end off the series. And with that, Commandos went dormant until the announcement of Commandos Origins. Pretty crazy to have nothing from 2003 until 2025, but that's just how things happen in the industry sometimes. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, like and subscribe. We have to talk about it, don't we? This game. I got this as a birthday present. And have you ever gotten a game as a present from a series you like? So you just kept saying you enjoyed it and kept on going on till the end, and then eventually just realized that was really bad. That was my Commando Strike Force experience. Released in 2006, Strike Force sees a serious revamping of the series formula. Writer Ignacio Perez stated that the goal was to combine the tactical nature present in the previous games with first-person shooters. And the FPS aspect definitely took over. Strike Force gives you access to 3 characters you would be familiar with from the previous games: the Sniper, the Green Beret, and the Spy. The Sniper has access to the Sniper Rifle, obviously, which allows him to hold his breath while using it to trigger a kind of bullet time. For his more stealthy aspect, he has knives, which can be used up close to do very suspect motions with the enemies, but can also be thrown. He can also throw smoke grenades, and is a very good swimmer with the ability to resist cold while others don't have as much of a good time in Arctic waters. So, if you want to think of him in reference to the past games, it's kind of the Sniper combined with the Diver. The Green Beret has guns, an assortment of assault rifles, shotguns, and machine guns. He can also dual wield those. He also has a knife, which apparently can be used for stealth attacks. I think I did it once. More on why shortly. However, he does also have access to anti-tank equipment through a rudimentary grenade launcher, mines, and the Panzerfaust. So, the Green Beret mixed with the Sapper. Lastly, the Spy. I can't really think of anyone he directly mixes with, as he has a touch of a few. He obviously has the Spy characteristics of taking uniforms and being able to move around undetected, with there being 4 ranks now: the Soldier, Sub-Officer, Officer, and Gestapo. If you are lower rank, they will spot you immediately. If you're the same, there's a timer until they do. And if higher, there's no issue, and you can even...
Lass uns dort hingen hen.
In order to get hold of these uniforms, you must murder. And in a throwback to the very first game, the Spy is equipped with limitless means to do so himself. Keep note of this for later. He comes equipped with a silenced pistol for more long-range eliminations, but also has piano wire to do so up close, and has gas grenades for area of effect genocides, which led to an embarrassing moment where, I just had a brain fart.
In welcher Kompanie dienen Sie?
So, that's the characters and their abilities. How does this translate into actual gameplay? Well, the box claims that there are a variety of mission types, so let's talk about them. It's basically 2. If I was to be generous, I would say 4, but 2 of those basically fall under the same umbrella. So firstly, the stealth missions. These usually include getting a character to a certain place, which I suppose would cover the infiltration part, or blowing something up, or killing someone, which I guess is the sabotage. These missions are predominantly given to the spy, but there are also some with the sniper, and some with both of them. Let's talk about the sniper ones first.
Even so, looks tricky. Need to keep the noise down.
They are extremely trial and error and formulaic. Stealth as a genre is not actually very easy to do, despite so many games attempting to. For me, there are particularly 2 crimes that will ruin a stealth experience. Firstly, is not knowing whether you are currently discoverable or not. Thief had the light gem, Metal Gear Solid 1 and 2 had your Soliton radar with the vision cones, 3 and 4 had the camo index with the exclamation mark giving you a warning that you're going to be discovered, and 5 also had that kind of bar which gradually filled. Splinter Cell had the light on your back, and of course, the previous Commandos games had the vision cones. And this is a crime that Strike Force commits. There is a radar that tells you which way the enemy is facing, but it doesn't give any kind of a clue to their peripheral vision. And you don't know how much leeway you have to get past an enemy's periphery. There were times where I would walk straight 90 degrees to the enemy without detection, and others where they spotted me. And this extends to the distance as well. There are times where I'm not spotted from a distance, and times where I am. At least in this situation, you do have the timer to allow you to get away, but I would still appreciate some consistency. Co-lead programmer Ishmael Ray stated that the AI that was used in the game was similar to that of the isometric versions. And it does kind of feel like they were better designed for that situation. But then you realize something that makes the game a lot easier and where it commits the second stealth crime, laying bare the routine nature of the gameplay. Stealth games are basically puzzle games. Each encounter requires you to determine a solution based off of what you're provided with. But what makes a good stealth game is the ability to mask that, covering up the mechanical nature of solving the scenario, making it feel natural, and so giving you a similar feeling of achievement to that which you would find like in a Myst, for example. And this is done through providing lethal and non-lethal means to eliminate enemies, but also having the ability to not need to eliminate anyone. Being able to get past enemies by a distraction or just by not being seen. It can also be done through different avenues of exit, which serve as rewards for exploration. Finding a specific disguise to get past enemies, finding something which clears enemies away from the path, or just finding an alternative path out of the area. All this is part of a routine, but the variety of options do not make it seem so. And this is a failure of Strike Force. After a few failures, you will discover pathways which have a lot fewer enemies and so it will be pretty clearly laid out, this is the way to go. So you will follow an enemy and murder him, look at the radar for the next enemy that's by himself, murder him. If an enemy happens to come by, you quickly chuck a knife in his face, and then you move on. So, let's move on to the spies missions. They are even more straightforward. Basically, you just need to get an officer or Gestapo uniform. And then you just do anything you want, really. And it's easier than you would think. In his missions, you will very quickly find an isolated enemy that will give you a uniform. And then you have a lot of leeway to look around the map to find higher ranking ones. The amount of time it takes for an enemy of a higher rank or same rank to actually see through your disguise allows you to basically just run past them until you find someone who is isolated. And this highlights the problem of the spy being lethal without limit. In Commandos 2 and 3, he had limited ability to kill or knock out enemies, needing at least 2 shots of the syringe to do so. And because of this, he was used as more of a distraction to open up pathways for other commandos. Even in the first game, where he did have unlimited ammo, the enemies had so many intersecting vision cones and patrols that you would only be able to really tactically eliminate certain enemies or need to be very conscientious if you were going to go on a killing spree. Now, I understand that there are missions here where the spy is by himself, and so can't rely on other commandos. But you still don't have to make it so easy to murder everyone. I mean, the objectives for his missions generally don't require you to kill people, so you could really have made it require a bit more thought to get certain disguises. But it is also a problem for missions where he isn't alone. Occasionally, you have access to 2 characters at the same time who you can cycle between. As I said, most often it's the sniper and Green Beret, and we will get onto that soon enough. But for now, I want to talk about the very few spy and sniper missions. They are obviously supposed to emulate what I spoke about earlier with the old games of using their abilities together. You know, use the sniper to take out an isolated guard, which will then give the spy access to a uniform. He can then infiltrate with that and distract a guard to let the sniper sneak in. He can then take out a higher ranking guard with his knife and move on from that. But that isn't necessary. The spy can just do everything himself. I mean, in this one mission, I only realized I could even swap to the sniper because I gassed myself by mistake and needed to go heal the spy. So let's move on to where I was more aware of his availability. The FPS missions. They are what it says on the tin. You either need to run around and murder everyone in the area, or need to defend against an enemy attack. Either way, it's a lot of These stages always involve the Green Beret, but there is only one of them where it's just him. The one stage which gave me the one opportunity right at the start of it to see the Green Beret stealth attack.
Suck my balls, my hairy fucking big balls. Wrap them around your fucking mouth.
Otherwise, he is coupled with the sniper. So, let's talk about the character swapping issues in these situations. Because it's really not great. And it's for one simple issue. when you switch characters, the one you leave behind is completely useless. Whoever you were controlling does absolutely nothing when not being controlled. They literally just stand there. Now, I don't really care about them not firing back, but the problem is they still get shot at. So quite often, they get wounded while you're off doing something else. You would think that this isn't something that happens to the sniper, since he tends to be nestled away. And that is true until the problem comes in. If the Green Beret gets wounded, you then have to leave the sniper's hiding spot to go revive him. But now you've revived him, and so you want to return back to your spot, but then he's standing there and gets gunned down again. So what you do, you heal him, switch to him so you can move him out the way, but now the sniper gets wounded. So we go back, heal him, switch over, now the Green Beret is wounded again. So what you end up doing is just sticking with one character, which you would think would be the Green Beret given his combat capabilities, but actually no, stick with the sniper. There are often a lot of long range issues where you do have to use him, and he is pretty handy close range anyway, so just pop the Green Beret in a corner and bring him out when there's a tank to deal with. I realized that in previous Commandos games, your characters were also left defenseless, but I have two responses to that. Firstly, a simple one, not really. As of Commandos 2, you can put them in Overwatch mode. And a longer response is the issue of the game is that it's too much of an FPS. If we ignore the Overwatch part, it is true that your commandos were defenseless. But it wasn't an issue in those ones because the point was not to get the entire garrison coming down on you. Whereas in this one, about 60% of the missions it is the goal. But before I get onto the issue that pertains to that 60%, I want to talk about the other 40%, because I have a third criteria of stealth where Strike Force fails. And that is escalation. The worst thing a stealth game can do is instantly game over if you're spotted. And the next worst thing is what Strike Force does, basically forcing you into a firefight. In the best stealth games, if you have the skill and wits, you can actually use alerted enemies to your advantage. You can create distractions to pull them away from guarding a path you need to travel down, or pull them into traps to take them out. Call guards away to isolate a specific target you want to eliminate or destroy. Or at the very least, you can break into cover and stay hidden until the enemies are no longer alerted. Now, you can kind of do that last one, but the difference is how you do it. When the enemy is alerted, they run around like crazy, which I guess is standard to what they did before, but the issue is, in the previous games, the spy was still free to patrol around the map while they were doing so. But now, when the enemies are in alert mode, they instantly see through a disguise, no matter what the rank is. So, if you want to get enemies to leave alert phase, you either need to gun down everyone in the area, or just sit and hide in a corner until it stops. Which I think we can all agree is pretty boring. So even a good deal of the specifically not action-based missions can be relatively easily done with machine gunning if you screw up the stealth part. Meaning the game is very much leaning in favor of FPS. But the game isn't great as an FPS. Firstly, you die pretty quickly. I was playing on normal, and look how quickly your health drains. Now, this could actually be a good thing in this type of game. It would encourage you to actually use stealth in the stealth missions, and take a more measured approach with character switching in action-based missions. But the issue with that is the spy's missions are often constructed in a way that you can easily just find a room to sit in and gun down every enemy through the doorway. given that the AI isn't great. And I've already mentioned the character switching issues in the other type of missions. Another annoyance? You can't lean around corners, which would have actually allowed for a more considered approach using bursts of fire and facilitating the easily dying factor. Without it, you're just forced to run around in the open.
Answer the question, soldier! Who do you work for?
So, the mix that Strikeforce was going for kind of just led to both sides being a bit half-baked. Which is a shame, because I'm not strictly opposed to the idea here. I wouldn't say I was giddy with glee at this avenue, but it could have been an interesting twist on the series' more traditional gameplay. I mean, Metal Gear Solid 3 came out 2 years before this game, and it did do a mix of action, disguises, and sniping. Yes, I'm saying they should have just made Metal Gear Solid 3. At the very least, they could have taken some cues into making a compelling plot. I never thought this would be something I cared about in a Commandos game, but the writers stated that they took care to give the characters unique personalities, so characterization is something I can complain about. And I can't think of a worse introduction to a character.
My name is William Hawkins. I'm a sniper, one of the best. Yeah, I have a gift. A gift from God. I suppose you could say I'm blessed. Oh yes, I am good.
Yeah, the characters aren't very interesting. The sniper is supposed to be cocky and full of himself, the Green Beret has a short temper, and the spy is serious and sullen. But you barely ever see these characteristics, save for very short comments made in the occasional cutscene. So that attempt wasn't very successful, and neither was the attempted intrigue in the plot. When landing in France, the drop zone comes under fire, but was supposed to be clear and safe. As a result, they suspect that a traitor revealed their position. And the Green Beret decides that just because the spy, someone who usually stays in hiding, wasn't present during the firefight, he must be the traitor. And there isn't too much else to it. Every occasional cutscene, the Green Beret will say, "I think you're a traitor," and the spy will reply, "You can't say that." We aren't ever given any reason to actually suspect him. The very next mission after that firefight shows you what he was doing during the shootings. And he never does anything suspicious again. And it doesn't even seem to really interfere with the Commandos' work that they're doing. Then it gets resolved at the end by saying, "Oh, that's the traitor there. By the way, I am actually German. More about that later." And then you never see him again. I do have one or two other complaints, but I am going to stop whining now. I feel like I'm starting to do that thing I said I don't want to, where I'm just overly negative for no reason. I do think the idea behind Strikeforce could have worked, and could be realized with today's capabilities. It's just a shame it wasn't so at the time. And even more of a shame given the mood around Pyro Studios. During its development, there was an optimism throughout the company, with CEO Ignacio Perez happily talking about plans for multiple games that they would be working on. However, Strikeforce did not sell well, and in 2008, one of those games, Cops, was cancelled. The company would release one more game, Planet 51, in 2009, before merging with Playmobil to make apps in 2012, and then going defunct in 2017, signaling the end of a company that knew its niche and perfected it before a drop in sales scared them into streamlining to appeal to the mainstream and damaging what made the games appealing in the first place. In 2018, Calypso Media, best known for the Tropico series, which is another series I enjoyed and think has been damaged by attempts to shake up the gameplay, gained the rights to Commandos. In 2020, they announced that they had begun work on a new game, which has now materialized as Commandos Origins, due to be released next month. Alongside that, there is currently a demo on Steam you can play, which I have, and firstly, 23 gigs for a bloody demo? Flipping heck. That original Commandos formula is definitely there, and I do like some of the tweaks. For example, if you hold down control when selecting an enemy, they will automatically carry the body after they take them out. You can now naturally hide in bushes. They've introduced environmental kills which don't alert enemies, and they've also introduced a few aspects which could add some challenge. For example, the pistol now has limited ammo and the decoy limited uses, so you can't just spam them as before. If an enemy has someone that they regularly interact with as part of their patrol route, if you take that enemy out, they actually seem to notice that they are gone. And just a few other refinements, I like that you can now just right click an enemy to see their vision cone, and also can now rotate fully outdoor environments. All good, but it just feels off to me. Firstly, it just feels slow and like static. Maybe it's just my PC, but the performance didn't feel fluid. Also, this might just be for the demo, but you don't seem to be able to use non-lethal means of taking out enemies. This, tied in with the general seeming lack of items, makes me wonder if they're reverting to the very first game in terms of features. I mean, if the banner image is anything to go by, Natasha and the driver aren't in it. Now, this might not be a bad idea for a reboot attempting to restart the series and create a new audience. But if you have experiences of playing beyond the Call of Duty and Commandos 2, it may feel a bit lacking. I'm not going to say too much though, it is a demo, and there is a good chance there's more in the full game, and the performance issues are likely to be fixed as well. I think it's just exciting to see Commandos back. I'm definitely going to sound like a nostalgic twit here, but Commandos was a staple series when I was growing up. It stood as a pallbearer for its genre, a great means of getting people into the genre at large, and maybe actually similar but slightly different genres. Ironically, I still haven't really played Desperados because Commandos actually got me interested in turn-based tactics games, particularly one that maybe I should talk about. And I think the industry could do with going back to that time. I've complained a fair few times about how homogenized the industry is nowadays, with most games playing in very similar ways with slight variations. So I think it would be great to bring back a period of multiple distinct genres with tentpole titles that have a recognition in the gaming zeitgeist. Because guess what? That's how you breed innovation in the industry. By having multiple genres, you can actually create new ideas by mixing between them. Yes, I know I keep putting Valkyria Chronicles. Where's my new Valkyria Chronicles, Sega? I'm sure we all love the idea of Majima running around like a pirate, but maybe the fact that you're starting to actually resort to doing things like that tells us that you can take a bit of a break from Like a Dragon and pay attention to your other franchises.